Are you staying forever? The question did not come from the wind or the dark. It came from a child's voice, small, steady, and unafraid, cutting through the crackle of fire like a blade finding a weak seam. Samuel Calloway stood still, one hand resting on a split log, the other near the iron stove. His breath shallow as if the air itself had tightened around him. He did not turn. He did not answer. Outside the woodshed, the night pressed close, cold and listening. The kind of cold that remembered things. Sam had lived on this ranch long enough to believe silence could be controlled. He had built his life on that belief, board by board, winter by winter, after the world took from him the one thing he had once allowed to matter. The land lay miles from the nearest town, a stretch of dry earth broken by scrub and rock, where the wind carried dust instead of mercy. The main house leaned slightly north, its timber darkened by age and storms. The horse barn sagged like an old man's shoulders. Fences complained when the wind touched them. Nothing here pretended to be new. Neither did Sam. He was nearly 40, though the lines in his face suggested more. Years ago, he had buried his wife on a hill where the ground froze so hard it had taken him 2 days to dig. Pneumonia, the doctor said, as if naming it made it manageable. She had faded fast, breath turning shallow while the snow climbed the windows. Sam remembered holding her hand, the way she squeezed once, twice, before letting go. He remembered what she had asked for in the weeks before that winter closed in. A child, someone to fill the quiet, someone to stay. Sam had said no, not out of cruelty, but fear. Fear dressed as reason. Love was something the land took payment for sooner or later. After she died, Sam wrote himself a rule as clean and sharp as a fence post driven deep into frozen ground. No one stays, no one depends on me. The rule worked because it was simple. It kept him alive, it kept him empty. He fed horses, mended wire, hauled water, and slept without dreams. The ranch survived. So did he. That rule had held until dusk that evening, when he saw them at the fence line. A woman and a boy. The light was fading fast, the sky bruised purple behind the mountains. They stood still, not calling out, not crossing the boundary. The woman's coat was worn thin, dust ground into the hem. The boy's hand rested in hers, his eyes lifted toward the barn as if memorizing it. Sam felt the familiar tightening in his chest, the instinct to turn away before the world asked for something. The woman spoke first. Her voice was calm, measured. She asked for water. Just water. Perhaps a place to sleep for one night, somewhere out of the wind. She did not ask to stay. She did not explain herself. That restraint unsettled him more than begging would have. He studied her face, the set of her jaw, the way she stood straight despite exhaustion. The boy did not hide behind her. He watched Sam openly, without accusation. Sam told himself he was only being practical. Night temperatures dropped fast. Wolves came close in winter. He filled a bucket, pointed to the woodshed, set his conditions clearly. One night, gone by morning. No exceptions. The woman nodded once, as if she had expected nothing else. Now, hours later, the fire burned low. The woman slept on a bed of blankets near the wall, exhaustion having claimed her without ceremony. The boy sat upright, knees pulled to his chest, his face lit by orange flicker. That was when he asked the question. Not do we have to leave, not will you let us stay. Are you staying forever? Sam placed the log into the stove. Sparks leapt. The iron door closed with a dull final sound. He crouched, adjusted the damper, and felt his pulse thudding too loud in his ears. Forever was not a word he used. Forever was what winter promised and always broke. Forever was what he had once imagined and buried. You should sleep, he said finally, his voice rough from disuse. The boy did not argue. He nodded, lay down beside his mother, and closed his eyes as if answers were optional. Sam stayed where he was, watching the fire until it settled into a steady glow. The question did not leave. It moved through him, slow and heavy, finding places he had sealed shut, Morning came gray and thin. Frost edged the troughs. The woman rose quietly, packing what little they had. She thanked him without meeting his eyes, as if gratitude were something fragile that might break if handled too directly. Over a piece of bread, she spoke in brief facts. Her husband had died in the cold. The bank had taken the land. Work had ended badly. She did not defend herself. The boy ate slowly, then pushed his last piece of bread toward her. A small, practiced gesture that made Sam look away. When they were ready, Sam went to the house and returned with a pair of boots. Old, but solid. He knelt, set them before the boy, and said they might fit with thick socks. The boy smiled once, quick and bright, and pulled them on. The woman's eyes lingered on Sam's face, searching for something he refused to name. They walked south toward the road. Sam stood by the fence until they were small against the land, until the wind erased the sound of their steps. The ranch felt larger after they left, stretched thin, as if something essential had been removed. He told himself the feeling would pass. It always did. But when he turned back toward the woodshed, the door creaked open in the wind, and the stove inside still held warmth. Sam closed the door carefully, slower than necessary. The rule stood where it always had, clear and firm. Still, the question lingered, pressed into the quiet like a brand. Are you staying forever? He did not know it yet, but the rule had already cracked. Sam did not sleep after they left. He sat at the small table in the main house, hands wrapped around a tin cup gone cold, listening to the ranch settle back into itself. The familiar sounds returned. The low shift of the barn in the wind, the distant stamp of a horse, the fence complaining as it always did. But they no longer fit the way they used to. The silence felt altered, as if it had learned a new shape and refused to forget it. He told himself it was nothing. Strangers passed through all the time, though rarely this far out. He had helped before, water, directions, sometimes a meal, but never overnight, never close enough for questions. The rule had held because he enforced it early, before names mattered, before faces stayed with him. Yet now he could not stop seeing the boy's eyes lifted toward the barn, the woman's careful distance, the way neither of them crossed the fence until invited. They had known the weight of refusal. That knowledge lingered. By mid-morning, Sam forced himself into motion. He checked the horses, mended a loose hinge, hauled feed. Routine had always been his anchor. But each task slipped loose from its meaning, performed without conviction. When he passed the woodshed, he paused. Inside, the blankets were folded. The floor swept clean. The stove was cold, ash neatly gathered. They had left nothing behind, not even proof they had been there at all. That absence struck harder than clutter would have. Sam remembered another winter, years ago, when his wife had stood at the same window, watching snow pile against the fence. She had spoken quietly then, careful not to sound hopeful. A child, she had said. Someone to grow up with this land. Sam had shaken his head, listing risks, costs, dangers. He had believed he was protecting them both. Now, with the land still standing and her gone, the protection felt hollow. By noon, clouds thickened in the west. Sam saddled his horse, then stopped, unsaddled it again, and stood there, undecided. He told himself they would reach the main road by evening. The town lay half a day's ride south. They would find work, shelter, something. People always did. Yet the image of the boy's too thin coat followed him, and with it the calm certainty in the question he had asked, as if he expected honesty from the world, even when it hurt. Sam loaded the wagon instead. Supplies he did not need went under the seat. Extra flour, salt, a spare blanket. He hitched the horse without allowing himself time to think. The wheels creaked as he turned south, the path worn by years of habit now leading him somewhere unfamiliar. He saw them an hour later, moving slow along the road. The woman walked with steady resolve, the boy matching her pace without complaint. Dust rose around their boots, settling into the creases of their clothes. Sam drew up beside them and reined in. He did not apologize. He did not explain. He said only that the town was still a distance off and he could give them a ride. The woman studied his face, weighing what it cost to accept help twice from the same man. She nodded once. The boy climbed up without hesitation, settling beside Sam as if wagons were where he belonged. They rode in silence, broken only by the wagon's groan and the sound of hooves on packed dirt. The land stretched flat and empty, a reminder of how small 3 people could be in it. Town came into view by late afternoon. It was little more than a wide street lined with false front buildings and expectation. Sam pulled up at the general store. He handed the reins to the boy without thinking, then went inside. He bought supplies quickly, deliberately. When the clerk raised an eyebrow at the added items, Sam met his gaze and paid in full. He did not look back when voices dropped and whispers followed them out into the street. Outside, a man Sam knew too well leaned against the hitching post. Walter Boone had been on this land longer than Sam, his posture bent by years of sun and suspicion. He nodded toward the woman, then the boy. Said it was dangerous to get involved. Said women like that brought trouble. Mentioned a name from the past, a story Sam did not care to revisit. Sam listened, then said nothing. He finished loading the wagon and climbed up. The boy handed him the reins, proud of the responsibility. The ride back was slower. The sky darkened early, the air sharp with promise of snow. Halfway to the ranch, the woman spoke. She said they could get down here. She said they would manage. Her voice was steady, but her hands tightened in her lap. Sam shook his head once. He did not slow the horse. They reached the ranch at dusk. Sam did not invite them in. He did not need to. He showed them the woodshed again, pointed out what he had already fixed that morning. Seams sealed, a thicker curtain hung. He left paper and a pencil on the table. The boy picked them up, careful, as if they were something rare. That night the question returned, softer this time. If they left again, could they come back? Sam did not answer with words. He fed the fire, watched it take, felt the warmth spread. Outside the wind rose, testing the walls. Inside, the stove held. Later, alone in the main house, Sam stood by the window. The woodshed glowed faintly through the dark, a small, stubborn light against the land. He told himself it was temporary. Everything was. Yet as the first snow began to fall, quiet and relentless, he understood something he had avoided for years. The rule had not saved him. It had only delayed the moment when he would have to choose. And the choice, once seen, did not disappear. The storm did not arrive all at once. It announced itself in pieces, a sharp wind first, then a sky that lowered until the mountains disappeared. Sam sensed it before the animals did. He felt it in the way the air pressed against his chest, in the memory of winters that had taken more than they gave back. He worked without pause, securing doors, checking lines, stacking extra wood by the house. By the time snow began to fall in earnest, the ranch was sealed tight against the cold, everything in its place. Everything except the matter he refused to name. In the woodshed, the fire burned steady. The woman moved quietly, folding blankets, keeping to the edges of the space as if she were still a guest who might be asked to leave at any moment. The boy sat at the table, pencil moving across the paper Sam had left, his tongue caught between his teeth in concentration. He drew without looking up, as if the world outside the page could wait. Sam passed by once, caught a glimpse of lines forming a shape that looked like a house, and kept walking. He did not stop. He was not ready. That night, the wind howled hard enough to rattle the walls. Snow packed itself into every crack it could find. Sam lay awake in the dark, counting the seconds between gusts, thinking of the road south, now buried, and the town that would not send help once winter made its claim. He thought of the clerk's look, of Walter Boone's warning, of how easily judgment found a home where certainty was scarce. He thought of the paper Boone had mentioned, the one the town required when supplies ran thin, the one that named responsibility clearly and without sentiment. Near dawn, There was a knock at the door. Not loud, careful. Sam pulled on his coat and opened it to find the woman standing there, bundled tight, snow already dusting her shoulders. She said the storm would worsen. She said they would leave now before it became impossible. She said it calmly, as if offering him relief. Sam looked past her, saw the boy's boots by the wall, still damp from the road. He shook his head. Not yet, he said. The words surprised him. They surprised her too. By midday, the storm closed in fully. The world beyond the ranch vanished into white. Sam worked until his hands ached, shoveling paths that filled again before he could turn back. When the rider from town appeared through the snow, Sam felt the weight of inevitability settle in his bones. The man dismounted stiffly, handed Sam a folded paper, and said little. Supplies would be rationed. Credit was gone. Anyone Sam vouched for would be his responsibility. The rider did not wait for an answer. He turned his horse and disappeared into the storm. Sam stood in the yard, paper heavy in his hand, the wind tugging at his coat. He read the words once, then again, as if they might change. Inside the house, the woman watched from the doorway. She did not speak. She did not plead. She understood what the paper meant because she had lived its consequences before. She began to gather their things. Sam went to the table, found a pen, and signed his name. The sound of it scratching across the page felt louder than the storm. He folded the paper carefully and placed it by the door. When he looked up, the woman had stopped packing. The boy stood beside her, eyes fixed on Sam, not questioning, only waiting. The days that followed blurred together. Snow piled high, trapping them inside the boundaries of the ranch. Sam rose early, worked late, and said little. The woman cooked, cleaned, and took on tasks without being asked, careful never to overstep. The boy helped where he could, carrying wood, holding tools, asking questions only when necessary. At night, they ate together, the table crowded in a way Sam had not known in years. Conversation came slowly, but it came. Small things, practical things, enough. When the storm finally broke, it left the land altered. Drifts stood taller than fences. The sky cleared hard and blue, the cold biting but manageable. The rider did not return. The paper remained by the door, signed and binding. Sam did not regret it. He felt something else instead, something like alignment, as if a part of him long out of place had finally settled. The boy greeted him that morning with a smile, wide and unguarded. No question followed. Sam placed a hand on his shoulder, brief but sure. The woman noticed. She said later, over coffee, that people in town never asked why she came, only how long she would stay. Sam nodded. He told her about his wife, about the child he had refused, about the rule he had believed would keep him whole. He said it had done the opposite. He did not ask for forgiveness. He did not need it. That afternoon, the boy showed Sam the drawing. A house, solid and square, smoke rising from the chimney. Sam pointed out the roof line, said it would need to slant north for the snow. The boy erased, corrected, nodded seriously. The woman smiled, a small thing, but real. When the man from the dairy farm arrived weeks later, well-dressed and polite, offering a place for the woman and the boy, Sam listened. The offer was reasonable, clean. A way back to the quiet he had once chosen. He did not answer immediately. Instead, he went to the door, took the key from the hook, and placed it in the woman's hand. He told the boy this was home. Not forever. Not if he did not want it. Just the truth. Spring came slowly. Snow melted into mud. The land softened. The boy went to school. The woman planted a garden. Sam added a chair to the table. The ranch filled with sound again, not echoes, but voices. Sam knew then that the choice he had made on the road, the choice to turn back, had been the first step. Standing against judgment had been easier than standing against himself. He had done both, and the rule, once absolute, no longer applied. The second storm came without warning, fiercer than the first, as if winter itself had taken offense at being endured. Snow fell sideways, driven by a wind that howled like something alive, testing every joint and beam of the ranch. Sam woke before dawn to the sound of it clawing at the walls. He lay still for a moment, listening, measuring the weight of the silence beneath the noise. This storm was different. It meant to stay. He dressed quickly and stepped outside, the cold biting hard enough to steal breath. The yard was already half buried, familiar shapes erased. He worked by feel, not sight, moving from barn to shed to house, clearing what he could, securing what might fail. Each step was an effort, each breath a reminder of how little the land cared for intention. By the time he returned inside, his hands were numb, his coat rimmed with ice. In the woodshed, the fire burned low. Eleanor was awake, her hair pulled back, sleeves rolled, tending the stove with practiced calm. Tommy sat nearby, boots on, waiting without being told. Sam noticed these things the way one notices weather shifts, quietly, with growing awareness. They were no longer guests moving cautiously through borrowed space. They were adapting, reading the room, acting as if they belonged to the work of surviving this place. By midday, the storm sealed them in completely. The road vanished. The fences disappeared. The world narrowed to what they could see from the windows and what they could keep warm. Sam inventoried supplies in his head, counting days, adjusting plans. He said little, but his movements grew more deliberate. He brought food from the main house into the shed, reinforced the door, showed Tommy how to stack wood so it would stay dry. The boy listened closely, absorbed every instruction, serious in a way that made Sam's chest tighten. Late in the afternoon, Eleanor spoke. She said they should leave when the storm eased, even if it meant walking. She said it carefully, not as a demand, not as a test, but as a statement of responsibility. Sam looked at her then, really looked, and saw the exhaustion beneath her composure, the readiness to be turned away that had never quite left her eyes. He shook his head once. "Not this time," he said. "Not like that." The night stretched long, wind battered the walls. Snow piled higher. They ate together, the fire the only steady thing in a world intent on breaking. Tommy grew quiet, leaning against Eleanor's side, sleep tugging at him. Sam watched the flames, thought of his wife's final winter, of the sound of her breathing growing shallow as the storm outside raged on, indifferent. He remembered the helplessness, the way the house had felt too large and too empty at once. Sometime before dawn, a sound cut through the storm. Hooves, faint but real. Sam was on his feet instantly, coat in hand. He opened the door to a white blur and saw a rider pushing through the snow, bent low against the wind. The man dismounted clumsily, his face red with cold, and thrust a paper toward Sam's chest. The town seal marked the corner. No credit, rations enforced. Any dependents Sam claimed were his responsibility in full. The rider did not wait for conversation. He turned and vanished back into the storm. Sam closed the door and stood there, paper trembling slightly in his hand. Not from cold, but from recognition. Eleanor watched him from across the room. She knew what it meant. She began to gather their things again, efficient, resigned, as if this outcome had always been inevitable. "Stop," Sam said. The word carried more weight than he expected. Eleanor froze. Tommy looked up, eyes wide, sensing the shift. Sam crossed to the table, laid the paper flat, and signed his name without hesitation. The sound of the pen moving was steady, decisive. When he finished, he folded the paper and placed it on the shelf by the door, where it could not be ignored or forgotten. "This isn't charity," he said quietly. "This is mine." Eleanor did not speak. She sat down slowly, the tension draining from her shoulders in a way that looked almost painful. Tommy moved closer to Sam, not touching, just near, as if proximity itself were a question answered. Sam rested a hand briefly on the boy's shoulder. It felt natural. That surprised him most of all. The storm raged on for 2 more days. They endured it together, sharing work and silence, learning each other's rhythms. Eleanor spoke of her past in fragments, never asking for absolution. Sam spoke of his wife, of the child he had been afraid to want, of the rule he had lived by and the cost of it. No one tried to fix what had already happened. They listened. That was enough. When the storm finally broke, it left the land transformed. Snow lay deep and clean, the air sharp and bright. The ranch stood intact, scarred but standing. Sam stepped outside and felt something shift inside him, something loosening that had been tight for years. Survival had become something shared. Responsibility had taken shape not as burden, but as connection. Tommy greeted him that morning with a grin instead of a question. Eleanor met his eyes without flinching. The paper on the shelf remained, signed and binding, but it no longer felt like a threat. It felt like a line crossed, a choice made and owned. Winter had forced his hand, belonging had followed. Spring arrived the way it always did on that land, cautiously, as if unsure it would be welcomed. Snow pulled back in uneven patches, revealing mud, rock, and the stubborn brown of grass that had survived the winter by refusing to hurry. Water ran where it had been frozen for months. The air softened, though the night still held cold. The ranch breathed again, slow and deliberate, and Sam felt the change in his bones before he trusted it with his eyes. Life settled into a rhythm that did not announce itself. Eleanor rose early, opening windows, letting light touch places that had lived too long in shadow. She cleared space in the yard for a small garden, her hands steady in the soil, as if planting were a promise she was careful not to name. Tommy began walking the long road to the small schoolhouse when weather allowed, his boots worn but proud, his drawings tucked into a satchel Eleanor had sewn from old cloth. Sam watched him go each morning from the fence line, never calling out, never waving, but always there. Presence, he was learning, did not need explanation. In town, the whispers returned. They always did when snow melted and people remembered each other's business. Sam heard them in the store, felt them in the way conversations paused when he entered. People asked him why he kept them, what he intended to do. Some framed it as concern, others did not bother. One afternoon, a man arrived at the ranch dressed too clean for the work he claimed to offer. A dairy farm east of town needed help, he said. Housing included. Stability. It was a reasonable proposal, carefully presented as a favor. Sam listened without interrupting. He did not look at Eleanor while the man spoke. After the man left, the yard fell quiet. Eleanor stood by the porch, her hands folded, her expression composed in a way Sam recognized too well. It was the look of someone prepared to leave before being asked. She said nothing. She did not ask what he would do. Tommy sat on the steps, tracing lines in the dirt with a stick, waiting. Sam went inside the house alone. He stood in the doorway of the room he had not changed since his wife died. The bed was still made the same way. The dresser still held things he never touched. He had believed for years that keeping it untouched was a form of respect. Now it felt like avoidance. He opened the drawer where he kept the key to the house, the one he had never given anyone. The metal was cool in his palm, heavier than it should have been. He returned to the porch. Eleanor looked up. Sam held out the key. He did not dress it in meaning. He did not explain. He placed it in her hand and closed her fingers around it before doubt could intervene. Then he turned to Tommy. "This is home," he said. His voice was steady. "Not forever, not if you don't want it, just the truth." Tommy looked at the key, then at Sam. He nodded once, as if accepting a fact rather than a gift. Eleanor's breath caught. She did not cry. She did not thank him. She simply stood there, holding the key, the weight of it anchoring something she had been carrying too long. From that day on, the ranch changed in ways both small and undeniable. A new chair appeared at the table, its legs slightly uneven but solid. Meals stretched longer. Laughter surfaced, tentative at first, then easier. Sam found himself speaking without planning to, sharing thoughts before deciding whether they were safe. Eleanor moved through the house with quiet confidence, no longer pausing at thresholds. Tommy's drawings multiplied, taped to walls, tucked into corners, marking the space as lived in rather than preserved. No one spoke of marriage. No one needed to. Love, Sam realized, did not always arrive with declarations. Sometimes it came as a series of choices made daily, without witnesses. He found Eleanor in the kitchen one evening, light from the window catching her face, and felt the old fear stir. He did not retreat. He stayed. That was enough. As summer edged closer, the land grew generous. The garden took. Horses fattened. The house filled with sound that did not echo. Sam still rose early, still worked until dusk, but the work felt different now. It connected him rather than isolating him. The rule he had lived by for so long no longer applied. He did not replace it with another. He did not need to. One evening, as the light faded slow and gold, Sam sat on the porch steps with Tommy beside him. The boy leaned into his shoulder without asking. Sam did not move away. Eleanor stood in the doorway, watching, the key hanging from a hook inside, no longer hidden, no longer singular. The land stretched out before them, vast and uncertain as ever. But the ranch no longer stood alone. Neither did Sam. And that, he understood, was the quiet miracle. The seasons would keep turning as they always had. Wind would still test the fences. Winter would return with its hard lessons, and the land would never promise safety. But inside the house, there would be light. Inside the walls, there would be voices. Not loud ones, not constant ones, just enough to remind each of them that they were no longer walking alone through the days. Sam sometimes stood at the window at night, listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch settling. The difference now was subtle but complete. The quiet no longer pressed in on him. It rested, shared, softened by the knowledge that if he turned, someone would be there. Eleanor moved through the rooms with an ease that came from not waiting to be sent away. Tommy slept without questions, his dreams untroubled by the need to ask where he belonged. Home, Sam learned, was not the absence of fear. It was the decision to stay despite it, not forever, not perfectly, just honestly. And in that honesty, in that choice renewed each morning without ceremony, something gentle took root, something that did not need a name. The land held them, the fire burned, the night passed. End of article. Good night.